Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to untangle the incredibly complex web of European data sovereignty, and we're going to reveal why those standard Gold Star Cloud security certifications you probably rely on, they might not actually protect you from foreign legal jurisdiction. Seriously, if you deal with sensitive data, this is absolutely crucial. It might just be the most important concept you learn all year.
Here's our roadmap for today's deep dive. We'll cover the illusion of certifications, practice versus ownership, the 24% rule, disclosure versus immunity, some really awkward AI arithmetic, and finally, a concrete buyer action plan for your next vendor meeting. Okay, let's jump right into Section 1, the illusion of certifications. So let's talk about that warm, fuzzy feeling of safety you get when a cloud vendor slides this massive, impressive deck of compliance badges across the table. You know the ones: ISO 27001, SOC 2 Type 2, Gaia X, DORA Ready. And look, every single badge is real and independently audited, but despite all those really impressive acronyms, they completely miss the single overarching question that actually decides whether your sensitive data is safe. And that question is, can a foreign government compel access to it? Because the hard truth, an ISO certification absolutely does not make the US Cloud Act just magically disappear. Which brings us to Section 2, practice versus ownership. All right, to make sense of this, let's look at a core contrast paradigm that basically organizes this whole alphabet soup of compliance frameworks. Honestly, if you sort all these frameworks into just two piles, the confusion kind of vanishes. So, Pile 1 proves competent security practices. These frameworks are basically asking, hey, do you run this competently and securely? But Pile 2 is all about who ultimately controls you and what laws can actually reach you. The takeaway here is pretty blunt. A certification proves security practices, sure, but it does not change legal jurisdiction. I mean, Amazon can literally hold every single certificate in Pile 1, but at the end of the day, it remains an American company, subject to American courts. Moving on to Section 3, the 24% rule. Let's get into the exact arithmetic required for true legal sovereignty in Europe. The whole thing hinges on this specific number right here, 24%. This is the ultimate test of ownership and sovereignty. We aren't talking about a firewall rule or some encryption protocol here. This is a hard mathematical cap. This rule belongs to SecNumCloud, which is issued by France's National Cybersecurity Agency, ANSI. Now, you really have to understand that SecNumCloud isn't just a private auditor's opinion. It is a rigorous, legally focused qualification backed directly by the French state. The government itself is standing behind the claim of security here. And it demands EU legal domicile, EU-only data storage, and complete immunity from non-EU extraterritorial law. And here's the actual rule doing all the heavy lifting. To pass this brutally hard test, non-EU capital and voting rights simply cannot exceed 24% individually or 39% collectively. That's the rule. You can check it right there on a company's capitalization table. To give you a sense of just how tough this is, one industry CEO actually pointed out that if ISO 27001 is a level 1 in complexity, SecNumCloud is a flat-out 10. All right, Section 4, disclosure versus immunity. Now, we really need to clear up a major nuance that a lot of folks get wrong about Germany's highly rigorous standard. When you compare Germany's BSIC 5 and France's SecNumCloud side by side, a really fascinating distinction pops up. C5 is an excellent mature security floor, for sure, but it merely requires you to disclose your jurisdiction. Basically, you just have to tell the buyer what laws apply to you. But that leaves residual Cloud Act risk completely in play. SecNumCloud, on the flip side, demands total jurisdictional immunity. To borrow a really stark, powerful metaphor from the source material, C5 alerts you to the legal danger. It tells you the gun is in the room. But SecNumCloud ensures the danger doesn't exist at all. It requires there be no gun. Honestly, that's exactly the phrase you should keep in your back pocket during your next procurement discussion. Let's just pause for a second to consider this number. 30 days. This represents the incredibly brief window back in 2025 between Microsoft claiming their new encryption features would make access to its European sovereign cloud technically impossible, and then their subsequent admission that, well, they actually couldn't guarantee complete immunity from US authorities. Literally 30 days between the marketing spin and the legal reality. Because at the end of the day, engineering simply cannot override legal jurisdiction. So because US hyperscalers are structurally ineligible for SecNumCloud, they have to adapt. They do the only thing the rule actually permits. They change who is in control by forming joint ventures. You see this with examples like S3NS, which is a Thales and Google venture, and Blue, built by Capgemini, Orange, and Microsoft Azure. In these setups, a French entity holds the keys and the majority ownership. This beautifully proves that the rule restricts U.S. control, not U.S. technology.
Let's take a quick look at how this all evolved chronologically. The EU originally tried to create this standard called EUCS High Plus to cover sovereignty, right? But they ended up stripping the ownership rules out after facing massive pushback. But here's the thing. The sovereignty requirements didn't just disappear. They evolved. They migrated out of those standard certifications and went straight into new mandates like France's Cloud au Centre doctrine and upcoming procurement rules.
Which brings us to Section 5, the awkward AI arithmetic. Now, what gets really interesting is when we apply the strict European arithmetic to today's top AI darlings. Let's look closely at the AI company Cohere, which is heavily used in Europe. We can see that its roughly 90% Canadian ownership blows completely past that 24% individual cap. Now, I know what you're thinking. Canada isn't subject to the U.S. Cloud Act, but the SecNumCloud rule specifically asks if you are EU-controlled, not just non-American. So what this means is that while the underlying sovereign infrastructure might be perfectly safe, the software-as-a-service layer sitting right on top of it, the layer actually touching your data, is not sovereign.
And then, when we look at Mistral, man, it gets even more complex. Yes, Mistral is a French company, but look at their massive funding rounds. Their cap table includes non-EU giants like A16Z, NVIDIA, Cisco, IBM, and Salesforce. So the million-dollar question is, does this massive collective non-EU holding exceed that 39% limit? We actually don't know for sure because the cap table isn't fully public. It's kind of wild. The loudest sovereignty claims in European AI are being made by companies whose compliance with Europe's very own sovereignty arithmetic has never even been publicly tested.
All right, let's wrap this up with Section 6, the Buyer Action Plan.
So what are we actually supposed to do about all this? Let's equip you with a practical strategy you can actually use come Monday morning. First off, you need to know what's coming down the pipeline. Brussels has basically conceded that standard cybersecurity certifications just can't solve the sovereignty issue. So they're moving the test directly into procurement law with the proposed CADA framework. That's the Cloud and AI Development Act. It establishes 4 union assurance levels specifically designed to score jurisdictional risk and legal control. Meaning the shiny badge on your vendor's website is about to become a whole lot less important than their CADA assurance level.
You might want to grab a screenshot of this buyer's decision tree. It walks you through the whole process step by step. Step 1, name your threat model. Are you more worried about hackers or are you worried about a foreign subpoena? Step 2, decide if jurisdiction actually matters to your specific data. If a foreign legal order compelling your data would be a total catastrophe, those standard security certs aren't going to help you. Step 3, apply the DPIA test to see if you can swallow the residual risk. Step 4, double-check which layer, the infrastructure or the software, is actually holding your data. And finally, Step 5, start planning for those new CADA rules now. I highly recommend taking these exact 6 questions right into your next procurement meeting. Ask them, point blank, who their ultimate parent company is. Ask for written immunity from non-EU law and just watch their reaction. Ask for their non-EU capital percentage. Honestly, if a vendor can't immediately answer your questions on ownership and non-EU capital, the rest of the meeting is just theater. Ultimately, the absolute most crucial takeaway from this explainer is this. Don't just ask if a provider is sovereign. Honestly, that word has been marketed into total meaninglessness. You have to ask the arithmetic question. Who owns you and what law reaches you? Look past all the slick marketing press releases and the shiny badges. Read the certificate, yes, absolutely, but then go read the shareholder register to see who actually controls your data. Because at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, is your sensitive data currently protected by a marketing brochure or is it protected by the law?